Well, hello there. We're having another look at some orchestration. This, again, is this mini little thing about brass, or incorporating brass, really. So it's the whole of the orchestra. But again, it's in preparation for another of the John Williams cues from A New Hope. But this particular one is all about orchestral differentiation. In other words, using different sections of the orchestra for different roles. So in this particular one, the harmony is entirely in the brass. The melody is entirely in the wind and the strings. There's a little bit of harmonic role that takes over, and really this particular one exemplifies extremes of dynamics. So it's marked ffff at the beginning, and then it goes down to piano within 5 bars. How is that achieved? We'll find out. And then suddenly it goes to ffff again, just for a couple of bars later. So I'll play you the Sibelius version. So prepare for a little swoop. There we go. And this is the Sibelius version. So this particular excerpt is from the Sevsey Cambridge Guide to Orchestration, and this is score analysis number 36. I think there are about 50 or 60 of these. And it goes through sort of strings, then wind, then, you know, through the ages from sort of classical all the way through to sort of early romantic and then late romantic, and then it incorporates the brass, goes through mostly sort of mid 19th century to late 19th century, and then goes all into sort of Debussy and Stravinsky and things like that. So it's a really valuable book, and basically the book is so that you get exercises in short score which you then rescore, and then it shows you how it was done and then discusses it, and this is the discussion of that. So when it's played by the real orchestra, it sounds like this. Just let me prep that. And so on. So, you know, again, it is a type of orchestral differentiation. This is the short score now. So I will endeavour to try and fill up that screen a little bit if I can. There we go. Have I got all the information there? So, yeah, so I'm just going to play it once more. I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. Let's see whether I've got it in the right place. There we go. So there's an enormous amounts in here. So what we'll do is we'll go slowly through it, and I'm going to flip between this page, which has this bit of information on. So let's just leave that there for a little bit, and then go back to it. So starting at the top, I've got this particular bit is about contrasts in different rapidly changing aspects of orchestration, and volume as well, let's not forget that. Melody in multiple octaves, and also separation or differentiation of functions and assignment of or to a particular group, which I will respell because that is awful. So gradual colour mix, in other words, combinations of sounds, so gradual blend, differing techniques to achieve diminuendo. So what Sèvres has done is he's divided this particular excerpt into two main sections. The first section is 153 to 157. So 153 is this, 157 is this. And he further subdivides into section 1A, which are just these two bars, and then one bar of section 1B, and then 2 bars of the gradual diminuendo, where the strings are very prominent because nothing else is playing that melody at that point. So another form of differentiation, this time more blended harmony with the wind and the brass as well. So just to go through the scoring of this, so we've got flutes 1 and 2, piccolo, oboes 1 and 2, clarinets in A 1 and 2, bassoons, let me just make that a little bit bigger, 4 horns, trumpets in A, trombone, 2 tenor trombones, third trombone, bass trombone, tuba, timpani, and then violin 1, 2, viola, cello, contrabass as well. So going back to here. So those are the main sections. So section 1, section 2, obviously section 2 is just these 2 bars here, you know, loud. So the first section deals with this huge diminuendo from ffff, a typical Tchaikovsky marking, all the way through to piano. And then the next bit is triple F, where we also have quite a pungent, strident melody, which is this main motif here. Like that, amongst all the sort of harmonic stuff going on as well. It's amazing how it cuts through, actually, which we'll have a look at. So I will go through this. So section 1A is a separation of melodic and harmonic function. So with the wind, not bassoon 2 and strings, they play the melody at 4 octave layers. No need for additional lines of harmonies in these sections. So in other words, he's just saying that this is 4 octaves in sort of layers. Obviously, it's 3 octaves apart. So we've got piccolo and flute, then flute 2 and oboe 1, oboe 2 and clarinet 1. Remember, we saw that with Beethoven as well. That seems to be a sort of popular sort of combo. And then clarinet 2 and bassoon 1. There is a mild complaint where he says bassoon 2. Sèvres queries that it won't be heard. Well, yes, that's right. It won't be heard in this bar, but actually, by this bar, it kind of takes over a little bit, and it does blend with trombone 3 or the bass trombone at that point. It's slightly unclear in any of the scores I've got which plays what. I'd imagine that would be, you know, that could be bass trombone, that could be tuba. So there's a discrepancy over the instrumentation, so apologies. Obviously, in the example I've just played, there is a tuba, bass trombone, and 2 tenor trombones. So we have 4 instruments, so that would be bass trombone, and that would be just the tuba at that point. Very, very sort of powerful bass at that particular juncture. So those are the melody. So obviously we have the strings and the wind. So that's equivalent to violin 1, that's equivalent to violin 2, viola and cello. So those are a certain amount of blended melody, but essentially the function is separated out from the brass. So what is going on the brass? So the harmony is 4 horns, 2 trumpets. So 2 horns equals 1 trumpet in power balance. So that from the various bits we did last session, 2 horns to 1 trumpet is for any dynamic above mezzo forte. Horns play in pairs with unison doubling with trumpets an octave above. So this is the trumpet line here, and this is the horn line here. So ignoring that first beat, because it's slightly more integrated, you'll find that the second trumpet is actually doubling that middle note on the horns at that point. So in fact, the way that horns are divided is horns 1 and 3 and the top note, then horn 2, which shares the note with trumpet 2, and then horn 4 as well. Then it's just the pairs of horns. So horns 1 and 3 on the top note, horn 2 and 4 on the bottom note, and an octave higher, the trumpets take those the same thing as well. So if I just sort of select a note, Oh, I haven't got my keyboard plugged in, so never mind. It's fine. But basically they all play in octaves all the way through that sort of section. Then we got bass is bassoon 2, as I've said before, he queries it, but then bass trombone, tuba, double bass, and the timpani reinforces that. It's still very, very powerful at that sort of particular juncture as well. So coming up to it. Yeah, so even in the space of 2 bars, there really is a massive decrescendo in that sort of whole bit. But you can see how the timp really reinforces it. But very, very brassy sound in those deep bass registers as well. Very, very brassy. So that is the bass. Then section 1B, the piccolo and the 2 trumpets drop out. And the figuration of the harmony, or the figural harmony, moves from the trumpets to the oboes, clarinets, bassoons. Tchaikovsky avoids the sudden drop of sound from the trumpets this way, and retains the remaining orchestra retains its own functions. So in other words, melody and harmony as well, and bass line. So let's have a look at that. So you'll see here that at this point we've got oboe, clarinets, bassoons sort of taking over. And then we've got flute, clarinets just on that melodic roll here as well, which is just replicating the strings down in this cordon. But you'll see where the trumpets drop out, the oboes kind of take over at that stage as well. So there's an interesting sort of terraced dynamic effect where the decrescendo is achieved by actually moving the function from harmony in the brass or the trumpet section to the woodwind section instead. So let's again try and just get to that little bit. So listen for the trumpets. Yeah, in fact, actually, I mean, really, the horns sort of really take over more than the woodwind. It's just there for a little bit of flavouring, I think. And I'm just stopping it there. So section 1C, the bit that I've just played, the melody is all in the strings, but nowhere else. So it's just these 2 bars now. So it's just the melody just in the strings at this point. Then harmony in the horns, flute and bassoons, which seems to be a sort of interesting combination for Tchaikovsky. And the bass, the strings, but the brass cutting out after that first beat here. So they do play for the first sort of bar, but then they cut out on that A. Again, a typical sort of dovetailing effect where it's the brass is a quaver long in terms of the sustain, so it really just joins that sort of little bit of join in the cello. It's a sort of typical orchestration device, although kind of not necessarily favoured these days, because people sort of query, what do you mean by having an extra quaver rest? Where should we come off? Well, you come off on the quaver, surely. So, so you get that little dovetailing effect. The dynamic reduction is done in the following ways. So, diminuendo, the trombones drop out, the timpani drops out, the trumpets drop out. There's a rit, and later even the oboe and the clarinet and violas drop out as well. In 1C, bars 156 and 157, 2. So, in other words, the violas also drop out at that point, which is interesting. I think they drop out at that bit where the melody just takes over. So the melody is only in the violins at bar 157. The melody previously also in 3 different octaves is now only in 2 octave layers as well. by this point. So in other words, the sort of extremes of register, we had 4 octave layers here, 3 octave layers at that particular junction, then 2 octave layers at that point. So that's another way of decreasing that dynamic or perceived dynamic as well. Semiquavers are reduced to crotchets as well. There's a drop in register too. That's also quite important. Low flutes with bassoons and doubling by horns is typical of Tchaikovsky, which is all of this bit. And there's sort of little interesting bits where the first flute actually goes below flute 2. You'll notice where I've put here, flute 1 and 2 are in their proper order, and then suddenly they go below because of the voice leading effect in that particular juncture. But they're just simply doubling whatever the horns are doing. The horns are still quite high in the upper register at that particular point. So he says, as a word of caution, watch out for expansion of octave doubling without increase in instrumentation, because that results in the diminuendo as the line thins out. In other words, if you have more octave lines without increasing the instrumentation, that you actually get a diminuendo, because you also run the risk of instruments in weaker registers as well. So a dynamic increase would be achieved by Danayeks themselves, increase of density, in other words, more instruments, more octave doublings, expanding that with an increase in the instrumentation, switching to brighter sounds in the various registers of those instruments, activating rhythm and using pure sounds as well. So that is all of section 1. And again, I've just sort of put things like, bass in green, melody in red, and harmony in blue. So you can see how the harmony sort of shifts from the brass into the wind and just the horns, and then it shifts back again. This time in section 2, we'll have a look at what's going on. So in section 2, let's see if I can get both of these in the same bit. Just about. There we go. That's good. So section 2, melody is the trombones 1, 2 and 3 and bassoons 1 and 2. So you'll notice it says trombone 1 and 2. Then below that, an octave lower, is bassoon 1 and 2 with trombone 3 to balance that. So that is that particular bit. The signal motif, which is the digga-da-dum-bum, is played by oboes and trumpets. They're just in unison with each other. Oboe 2, it says, is in a coarse register, but that's being reduced by being doubled with the trumpet 2. So in other words, that's almost the lowest note on the oboe. It'll sound quite nasal, but with a trumpet, it's fine. It will blend pretty well. So therefore, the harmony is in the cellos and violas, which are playing mostly in octaves, thirds, and sixths, and then the horns also play as well 1, 3, 2, 4, with the clarinets just in that last bar taking the first 2 upper voices of the horn, so the F natural and the D. They do that as well, whereas horn 2 and 4 will do that an octave lower. And then the bass line is double bass and the timpani tremolo. Sort of interesting to have the bass tremolo as well. I know people don't favour that these days, but with a reinforced timpani and nothing else in the bass, it can be quite effective. Let's have a listen to that, whether we can just get to it on here. So coming up soon. Yeah, so actually it's quite interesting. They do maintain that sort of, they basically double the timpani roll. So that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think with double bass tremolando, if you've got enough of them and everything's a sort of loud enough dynamic, it can almost be digga 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 digga, you know, this sort of almost rhythmic tremolando, which is really interesting. And of course that's also reinforced by the G sharp. Interesting though that the G sharp doesn't have a lower octave on that, to distinguish it a little bit from the extreme resonance of before, possibly. Let's just go back again. Yeah, and in fact, actually, it's not really necessary because we've already got the basses playing that pitch, which would be an octave lower. In other words, there is what they're doing there. So we don't really need it. It's just not required. And this is an amazing thing about Tchaikovsky and great orchestrators, is that they didn't over-egg and managed to sort of, get clarity and balance in the most amazing means. So final thought, strings and wind with the brass, or versus the brass rather, was a common romantic technique and results in clarity and balance. Bass line shared, though, as well, which is very similar to the Prelude to Carmen by Bizet. So he also includes that as a sort of a little side example of what's going on, and then simply delineates what I'd said before in terms of what the functions are: melody, harmony, and bass, with various different things. You might also think, well, what happens if there's another melody or a counter melody? Well, there sometimes can be, but the point of this is that there doesn't need to be, because the melody is all you need because of the amount of octave layers that we've got. We don't need any other sort of subsidiary line at that point. It's already complex enough. And, in effect, you've still got two layers anyway, because you've got the bass line, which is going up. You've got a melody, which is sort of remaining static, like this. And then you've got the harmony anyway. So we don't need anything else going on. And again, it's a typical sort of orchestral error, perhaps, that sometimes you have too many things going on at once. And it's always good not to have too many things going on at once. And Sevsey, later in the book, also criticises quite a lot of particularly sort of German, Austro-German composers in the late Romantic era for having too many things going on in the middle register, too many lines, too many sort of complex bits of movement, which obscure and obfuscate the clarity of the work as well. So an interesting one here about differentiation, which I think now leads us on to perhaps one more brass thing before we have a look at the Williams. But I just thought that was an interesting one to have a look at and to show you how clear Tchaikovsky's orchestration actually is, and also that what a great exercise it is to just reduce those little bars. And it's just, you just need to do 2 pages of something, 1 page of something. You don't need to do the whole movement to learn what you need to learn from these things. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and I very much look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.